Sharon Stone is one of the defining actresses of the 1990s, but unlike a lot of stars from that era, she didn't exactly shoot to the top overnight. She spent years buried way down the cast list, bouncing between small supporting roles in movies nobody remembers. And honestly, that may have been one of the best periods of her career. Critics barely knew she existed, which meant the rest of us didn't have to hear them explain why Sharon Stone supposedly couldn't act. Some people apparently are still enjoying that blissful ignorance. Every once in a while, though, critics would notice her, a movie would get destroyed, and Sharon would find herself right back where she started. So today, we're looking at the rise, the fall, the rise again, and the many, many other falls of the woman who eventually became one of the biggest stars of the 90s. Stone made her film debut in Woody Allen's Stardust Memories in 1980. That sounds like a pretty good place to start, except almost nobody noticed her. One person who apparently did was Wes Craven. Back then, he was still a few years away from A Nightmare on Elm Street. Stone ended up in his 1981 horror movie Deadly Blessing. It actually did reasonably well considering its tiny budget, but critics absolutely hated it. Luckily for Sharon, there were plenty of other targets in the cast, so she didn't take much of the damage herself. This was also her first brush with the Golden Raspberry Awards. The Razzies had barely been around long enough to become a thing, and they were already handing out nominations to a Sharon Stone movie. After that, her career pretty much disappeared into television. She bounced between TV shows, TV movies, guest appearances, and small supporting roles. Somewhere along the way, Brian De Palma considered her for the female lead in Scarface and passed. Michelle Pfeiffer got the job instead. Then came Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Well, it came for Kate Capshaw, not for Sharon Stone. Stone was reportedly one of the favorites for the female lead, and at one point the role looked like it was basically hers. Then Kate Capshaw showed up on the final day of auditions, got the part, and eventually married Steven Spielberg. So whatever she did in that audition, apparently it worked really, really well. Sharon went right back to small roles. Then in 1985, Cannon Films came calling. And if anyone could turn a struggling actor into a star in the 80s, it was Cannon. Just ask Jean-Claude Van Damme. Unfortunately, Sharon Stone was not about to become the female Van Damme. Her big Cannon project was King Solomon's Mines, starring Richard Chamberlain. For Cannon, this was serious money. The movie cost $12 million. Van Damme movies at the same studio could be made for around $1.5 to $2 million. Even Chuck Norris usually operated somewhere in the $4 to $6 million range. So, by Cannon standards, King Solomon's Mines was a legitimate blockbuster, and commercially it did okay. The movie made around $14 million in the United States, with Germany and France adding another $2 to $3 million each. Critics, however, absolutely buried it. The movie picked up several Razzie nominations, although Sharon once again managed to avoid becoming the main target. Cannon apparently saw enough money there to make another one. A year later came Alan Quatermain and the Lost City of Gold. It cost $13 million, and there's a reason far fewer people remember this one. It crashed at the box office. And this time, Sharon couldn't hide behind the rest of the cast. Critics noticed her. For Lost City of Gold, she received her first Razzie nomination. The movie flopped, the reviews were brutal, and Stone's career got knocked right back down again. She returned to small supporting roles while collecting rejection after rejection at auditions. Michael Douglas, for example, rejected her for Fatal Attraction in 1987. Glenn Close eventually got the role. In Stone's case, the problem apparently wasn't that she couldn't act. She was simply considered too young. So instead of Fatal Attraction, Sharon Stone got Police Academy 4. The fourth movie suffered a major box office drop. Compared with the earlier installments, became the first Police Academy movie to attract Razzie attention, and was also Steve Guttenberg's last appearance in the franchise. By this point, Stone was basically taking whatever work she could get. And then one actual hit finally showed up. Above the Law, the movie that introduced the world to Steven Seagal. This was Seagal's first film, and he threw himself into it the way Van Damme did in the early days of his career. He worked on the script, helped scout locations, spent nights in the editing room, and worked with the director on casting. And one of the people he helped cast was Sharon Stone. Stone has said the shoot was miserable. She knew exactly what her role was. She was basically there as decoration for Steven Seagal. She didn't like him very much, and apparently he drove her crazy on a regular basis. But she also says she learned something important from him. She had never met anyone with that level of absolute confidence in himself, and apparently the confidence worked. Above the Law turned Steven Seagal into a star almost overnight. Sharon Stone? Not so much. She spent the rest of the 80s bouncing through forgettable movies and flops, some of which went straight to video. One of them was Blood and Sand. Stone hated that movie so much that she later bought a VHS copy and smashed it with a hammer because she couldn't understand how she had ever agreed to be in something that bad. And then came Total Recall. Stone says she read the script about 30 times and still had no idea what was going on, which is especially funny considering all the stories that have circulated for years about Sharon Stone supposedly having one of the highest IQs in Hollywood. There's also a famous story about her audition. According to the story, it took place in a hotel room with only Stone, director Paul Verhoeven, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. And since this was Paul Verhoeven, you can probably guess that they weren't sitting around reading Shakespeare. Stone and Arnold were acting out a scene on the bed when Verhoeven told her she needed to be much more aggressive. Sharon apparently took that direction very seriously and started going after Schwarzenegger with her fists. Arnold tried to defend himself while Verhoeven watched from the sidelines, apparently delighted with what he was seeing. That was it. They had found what they needed. And according to people who worked on Total Recall, Arnold remained a little nervous around Stone throughout production. Schwarzenegger himself later joked that he had never taken that much physical punishment from an actress on a movie before. For Stone, though, Total Recall changed everything. She says it was the first movie after which strangers started recognizing her on the street. The marketing campaign also included her famous appearance in Playboy, and the issue became one of the magazine's biggest sellers. Total Recall cost $65 million and finished with $261 million worldwide. Suddenly, studios knew Sharon Stone's name. The offers started coming in. Her other movies still weren't exactly setting the box office on fire, but for the first time in her career, Sharon was making enough money to buy herself a house. And then 1992 happened. Basic Instinct arrived in theaters and became one of the most sexually provocative, mainstream thrillers Hollywood had ever released. Somehow, it made it into theaters with an R rating instead of NC-17. Even more surprisingly, it became a massive box office hit. Getting it made was another story. Studios were nervous. Actors were nervous. Actresses read the script and ran in the opposite direction. Michael Douglas didn't. Douglas came aboard, took on producing responsibilities, and helped drag Basic Instinct through development hell. Once he was involved, he started approaching major actresses for the female lead, and almost everybody said no. Michelle Pfeiffer showed some interest. Demi Moore did too. But Douglas had one major requirement. He wanted another real star opposite him. He believed a movie this risky needed two major names at the center of it. Finding an unknown actress willing to do the movie wasn't the problem. Finding a star willing to do it was. Another reason Michael Douglas wanted an equally big star opposite him was simple. He was worried Basic Instinct could blow up in everybody's face. His thinking was that if the movie bombed and critics and audiences tore it apart, two stars could share the damage. But if Douglas was the only major name in the movie, all of that damage would land on him. That's why Douglas initially said no when Paul Verhoeven suggested Sharon Stone. But the clock kept ticking, and every major actress they approached kept finding a reason to stay very far away from Basic Instinct. Michelle Pfeiffer eventually passed after they couldn't work out an agreement over the use of a body double. Demi Moore passed too. And according to some accounts, Moore wasn't scared so much by the nudity as by the possibility that the movie would crash and burn and take her rising career down with it. At one point, the whole project was in danger of dying. So, Verhoeven went back to Douglas and once again told him to take a serious look at Sharon Stone. Douglas finally watched Total Recall and saw exactly what Verhoeven saw. Stone could go from sweet and vulnerable to absolutely terrifying in about 3 seconds. And with Basic Instinct running out of options, Douglas finally decided to take the risk. Funny enough, Stone almost said no herself. She has said that she felt incredibly uncomfortable around Michael Douglas. But after the movie became a hit, she realized that the discomfort actually helped. There was real tension between them, and that tension ended up on the screen. So, in Total Recall, Arnold Schwarzenegger was apparently afraid of Sharon Stone. 2 years later, Sharon Stone was afraid of Michael Douglas. Hollywood has a beautiful way of keeping things balanced. Douglas, by the way, still wasn't ready to treat Stone like an equal star. He refused to put her name next to his in the opening credits, a decision that drew criticism from a number of Hollywood stars after the movie came out. But Douglas's position was pretty simple. He was taking most of the risk. So before the title, there would be one name, his. Then there was the MPAA. They were not exactly thrilled with the movie Verhoeven handed them and refused to give it an R rating in its original form. Verhoeven, fortunately, had seen this coming. He shot many of the sex scenes from multiple angles, with different framing and different coverage. So every time the MPAA told him to cut something, he could reshape the scene instead of simply throwing the whole thing away. And somehow, that scene made it through. You know the one. The story behind it has become almost as famous as the scene itself, partly because Stone has told different versions of what happened over the years. In some interviews, she said the idea came from her. In others, she said Verhoeven never properly told her what the camera would see. Other versions have been much more confrontational, with Stone saying she was pressured into removing her underwear. Verhoeven's version is very different. His argument is basically that a woman wearing a miniskirt, sitting directly in front of a camera, knows what the camera can see when she moves her legs that way. As for the idea that Stone was somehow forced into doing it, Verhoeven has pointed out that the scene was shot near the end of production, when there wasn't exactly much leverage left to hold over her. Basic Instinct opened in March 1992, cost $49 million, and made $352 million worldwide. Sharon Stone's career exploded. Naturally, some of the biggest offers were for movies that wanted Sharon Stone to do more or less what audiences had just paid to see Sharon Stone do. That led to Sliver in 1993. Stone was paid $2.5 million for Sliver. For Basic Instinct, she had made only $500,000. Unfortunately, becoming a superstar also meant Sharon Stone no longer had much reason to tolerate people she didn't like. And according to director Philip Noyce, she really didn't like William Baldwin. The two reportedly couldn't stand each other. Noyce has said they wanted to be filmed separately whenever possible. And then there was the kissing scene. Stone reportedly bit Baldwin's tongue so hard that he had trouble speaking for several days afterward, which, according to the story, is why Baldwin is suspiciously quiet in a few scenes. Paul Verhoeven later offered his own explanation for the problem. According to him, Sharon Stone needs an actor opposite her whom she genuinely respects. Give her someone she respects and she completely commits. She becomes electric on camera. Give her William Baldwin? Well, apparently you get Sliver. That was also one of the reasons Verhoeven eventually walked away from Basic Instinct 2. He wasn't completely against making a sequel, but he wanted another major star opposite Stone. The studio wanted Sharon to be the only big name and the entire movie built around her. Verhoeven ended the conversation right there. Meanwhile, Sliver brought back another old friend from Sharon's career. Terrible reviews. Critics destroyed the movie. It picked up 7 Razzie nominations, and Stone got one of them. But commercially, it wasn't actually a disaster. Sliver cost $40 million and made $116 million worldwide. Her other 1993 movie wasn't nearly as lucky. Intersection, starring Stone alongside Richard Gere, completely bombed. And this time, Sharon didn't just get nominated for a Razzie. She won one. Stone apparently noticed the pattern. She started turning down the melodramas being offered to her and jumped into an action movie instead. That movie was The Specialist, and this time she got paid $5 million. Even better, Sylvester Stallone was starring opposite her. 2 giant stars, explosions, action, sex. What could possibly go wrong? The critics had an answer. The Specialist ended up with only 5% positive reviews, and Stallone and Stone won the Razzie for Worst Screen Couple. At the box office, though, things went much better. The movie cost $45 million and made $170 million worldwide. Although with Sylvester Stallone and Sharon Stone sharing the poster, the studio probably hoped for more. Then came 1995, the year that was supposed to change the conversation about Sharon Stone completely. Because something very strange happened. Critics loved Sharon Stone. Martin Scorsese cast her in Casino, and Stone delivered the performance that finally gave her serious awards recognition. She won a Golden Globe and received an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. And that same year, Stone also had The Quick and the Dead. By this point, she wasn't just starring in movies, she had enough power to help build them. Stone served as a producer and had a major influence over the project. She was the one who pushed for Sam Raimi to direct, reportedly because she loved Army of Darkness. She also wanted a young Leonardo DiCaprio in the movie. The problem was that the budget was already locked, and there wasn't enough money left to pay him. So Sharon paid him herself. $150,000 out of her own pocket. She also pushed for Russell Crowe, despite the studio being nervous because American audiences barely knew who he was. And apparently Stone enjoyed working with him. She has called her kiss with Crowe her favorite on-screen kiss of her career. Leonardo DiCaprio did not receive the same review. Stone later compared kissing Leo to kissing her own hand. So at least the $150,000 bought her a memorable experience. Unfortunately, it didn't buy the movie an audience. The Quick and the Dead cost $32 million and made only $18 million in the United States. For a while, Stone could still command huge salaries. The problem was that the movies attached to those salaries kept failing. Even putting her into expensive science fiction movies surrounded by other recognizable actors didn't seem to help. By the early 2000s, her career was sliding downhill fast. She did receive another Golden Globe nomination for The Muse, but one respected performance wasn't enough to stop the damage. Other movies were getting hammered by critics, and Razzie nominations were piling up again. By 2005, she had picked up more Razzie attention for Catwoman. And then came 2006. And Basic Instinct 2. This movie had spent almost a decade trapped in development hell, and Stone reportedly had a deal guaranteeing her $13 million, whether the movie actually happened or not. At some point, making the damn thing apparently started looking cheaper than continuing not to make it. Over the years, roughly a dozen scripts were written, and around 24 directors and actors were connected to the project in one way or another. Basic Instinct 2 could have ended up as a $30 to $35 million movie that never existed. Instead, Hollywood finally made it, for $70 million. And somehow, only about half of that seemed to make it onto the screen. Critics had a field day. Audiences mostly stayed home. Basic Instinct 2 made just $38 million worldwide. And Sharon Stone won another Razzie. After that, her career moved pretty quickly into straight-to-video territory. Most of the movies from this period didn't exactly give critics a reason to reconsider their opinion of her. She even tried her own version of the Liam Neeson aging action star formula with Mule. That didn't work either. But here's the funny thing about Sharon Stone. She's now 68, she still works, she remains associated with major brands, and she clearly doesn't need to spend her life chasing whatever movie role happens to be available. Every once in a while, she still pops up in high-profile projects, and she even played the villain in Nobody 2. And somewhere along the way, the critics finally stopped trying to explain to everybody that Sharon Stone was supposedly a terrible actress. Maybe they got tired. Maybe Sharon just outlasted them. Either way, her actual run as one of Hollywood's biggest stars lasted only about a decade. But in those 10 years, Sharon Stone became one of the defining sex symbols of the 90s and a genuine Hollywood superstar. Critics can argue about the acting all they want. Most actors would kill for a career peak like that. That was Frame Back. Subscribe for more rewinds and see you on the next one.